Money can buy you a number one seed, a really good roster, but it can't buy Phil Knight a playoff win.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, fight on, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm Mark Holkin, your host of Locked On USC, part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Look, whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you're going to download this podcast, it's always free. And never forget how much I appreciate your support. You know, I spent my New Year's Day, probably like a lot of you, hanging out, relaxing, watching a little bit of college football, hoping the best for our friends and family or whomever we might know in New Orleans. But tell you what was the last time? Well, I know the last time I saw a team with and I'm using finger quotes for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, with an OU taking a butt whooping like that while the whole country was watching. It kind of reminded me of the way USC killed OU back in the Orange Bowl, 55-19. What I watched in that playoff game, Ohio State, Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, they gave Lincoln Riley the blueprint for blue blood success. I mentioned it on yesterday's episode of Locked On USC, and I mentioned it on the episode before that. Give me a push up the middle on defense. Give me two big dudes who can control the line of scrimmage on the defensive line and watch the opposing quarterback freak out. If you watched the game, did you watch what Ohio State's interior defensive line did to the Oregon Ducks offensive line? And Dillon Gabriel, their quarterback, he had no ability. He could not step up into the pocket. He was constantly forced to move, to get out of his comfort zone. And before you know it, he was on his backside. Number 91 for Ohio State, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize. He weighs like 330 pounds, athletic freak. That dude was wrecking people. The Buckeyes defensive line destroyed Oregon's offensive line. Jack Sawyer, he was getting sacks. He was batting down passes like Uchenna Nwosu used to do for USC. USC recruited this guy, JT Tuimoloau. God, hard name to pronounce. I apologize. But that guy was crashing in from the outside, getting sacks. All because the way they were able to bend that offensive line from the middle. It creates havoc. As a team, in this game, Ohio State had 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. I saw a really funny tweet. Oregon now has more national championships than rushing yards in this playoff game. The joke, the punchline, 0 national championships is still more than negative 23 rushing yards. But that was the case. So it all started inside for Ohio State. And then everyone else on their defense just did their jobs. The linebackers made tackles. Their defensive backs stuck to their guys like glue. And Dillon Gabriel was constantly running for his life. Nobody was open. And he didn't have any time in the pocket to let guys kind of work their way open. And their running game was non-existent. Didn't help that they lost their running back early in the game to an injury. Nevertheless, you would think a roster that paid like that, like Phil Knight paid for, would have a running back behind the number one, right? Apparently not. In that game, halftime, it was 34-8. I mean, Ohio State was rolling. In fact, U of O, Oregon, they didn't even score to the last play of the first half. They didn't even get past midfield until their last drive of first half. But again, that was a dominating performance, but it wasn't as dominating as USC's 55-19 win over Oklahoma. So yeah, 41-21 looked great, but that game, what I watched Ohio State do, this is what I'm talking about. it just reminded me of that game that USC had against Oklahoma, that 55-19 butt whooping, took them behind the woodshed. Literally, just like Oklahoma had zero answer for Norm Chow and USC's offense with Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush and Londale White and Dwayne Jarrett and yada, 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 yada. The Ducks had zero answer for what Chip Kelly was calling on offense from the booth. Remember, he stepped down as UCLA's head coach so he could go to his strength. He just wanted to call plays on offense. He didn't want to deal with recruiting anymore. He didn't deal with the headaches of being a head coach and everything that's involved. He said, you know what, just pay me and I will call you one hell of an offense. Didn't matter if he called a run play or a pass play. Oregon, Dan Lanning, his crew, they looked lost, pathetic. Kind of like the Sooners did when USC just kicked the crap out of them back in 2004, 2005. Again, that's when Norm Chow was calling the offense. USC had a head coach, Pete Carroll. They had an offensive coordinator, Norm Chow. And yeah, I know Ed Orgeron was the defensive coordinator, but Pete Carroll, with that defensive mindset, he and Ed kind of collaborated on that defense. And he also made sure that Norm, balanced the offense. That was one of the issues. If there was any tension between those two, it was whose offense was it? Norm Chow made a point one day of saying, hey, it's USC's offense. It's not my offense. And that was because Pete wanted to make sure the run game did not get ignored, which I've been talking about all season long with Lincoln Riley, him ignoring the running game too frequently. So what did Chip Kelly dial up? Well, how about 500 total yards of offense? 319 yards through the air. Will Howard, very efficient, 17 for 26, 3 touchdowns. 181 yards rushing. 31 rushing attempts. Okay, 5 more rushing attempts than passing attempts. I'll live with that kind of balance. I'm good with that. The way the Buckeyes played, again, it reminded me and it just reinforced the idea. If you have a good balanced offense, a run game, big play capabilities, which Ohio State does, you can do a lot of stuff on offense when you have a strong defense. I get it, and I will be the first to admit today's game is more offensive oriented, but you still need to have a really good, solid, strong defense. That's what keeps you in games. That's what kept USC in games this year. Even though they scored 30 points a game, it was USC's defense that made USC's inconsistent offense, look better than it really was. So Ohio State, they did it the right way. They built their roster the right way, as far as I'm concerned. They went into the portal during this offseason to go get a couple of key pieces. Will Howard, a quarterback. They got Caleb Downs at safety from Alabama. Now you got 2 quarterbacks, one on offense, one on defense. But what Ohio State's done really well over the last few years, for a while, is they recruit really well. So what they actually did is they paid more for roster retention, and they still paid for the pieces they needed, but it was more about recruiting and developing the guys you have, keeping them in-house, building that team chemistry, that camaraderie, that culture, and taking care of them with your own NIL. So right now, USC's recruiting, they're starting to recruit the same way Ohio State is. They're getting bigger guys. And I'm really excited about the 2 guys so far that they brought in through the transfer portal. Keyshawn Silver and Jamal Jaw Jarrett. That's 700 pounds of interior defensive lineman. But it's the other guys they already have on the roster. They're keeping those key pieces, making sure they're taken care of. Look, I know Ryan Day has taken a lot of heat. That loss at home to Michigan. He hasn't beat Michigan in 4 years in a row now. And this last game at home, they didn't look prepared. The last game of the season. But they looked really well prepared for their rematch against Oregon, which Ohio State had a chance to win that game too early in the season. Anyways, that's water under the bridge. I have a really good feeling that Coach Riley was watching this game, the way it was called on offense. What I'm hoping is that he just bottles it up, put a cap on it, and then just pours it all over himself this offseason. Then I'm going to call my offense. If I'm not going to hire an offensive coordinator or play caller, I'm going to do what Chip Kelly did. Call an offense just like that. There was times where he was lining up as a quarterback under center. And I'm not just talking about in goal line situations, just for the hell of it. A lot of play action. They were using the run game to set up those big plays downfield with Smith and Ibuka. Do the same thing in LA at the Coliseum. You got Mekhi Lemon, you got Jacoby Lane, you got the tight ends. Play action kills a defense, especially when you back it up with a strong run game. And then on the other side of the ball, just use your big, bad defensive line and make the opponent's offensive line look pedestrian. And that's what Ohio State did to Oregon. It was such an amazing performance. Again, and it reminded me of how dominant, how prepared those Pete Carroll teams used to look. I just sat there and I could not do anything but just admire it. I thought it was a well-called game on offense. Defensively, Ohio State looked better than Georgia. And Georgia's got a really good defense. The way Ohio State's playing right now, they're going to be tough to beat. Although they will be taking on Texas, and that game will be played in the Cotton Bowl. So, home field advantage for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns. Another former Trojan coach. There is some loose, like I said, I'm tying this all together because of how I've seen USC play, coaches who are out there who are former USC coaches, styles, all that kind of stuff. So back in the day when I watched those Pete Carroll teams play, USC was dominant when they had a really big, powerful defensive line. They had a group of linebackers just cleaning everything up. We're talking about linebackers in the third segment of the show. So if Lincoln Riley, I know he watched the game, take what you saw and just start writing out your game plan. Get it ready. Because USC and Oregon, they play in Eugene in 2025. And I know it's a lot easier said than done. But USC could beat Oregon next year. They got the right pieces. If USC continues to improve on defense like they did this year, and they run the offense with the run game setting up the passing game, 2025 can be a season to remember. A much better season to remember than 2024. And let's just go ahead and start the countdown. I started it yesterday. Today, well, if you're watching this episode, it's now January 2nd. So just 240 more days until USC and Missouri State kick off in the Coliseum. We got the countdown clock started. Here we go. The college playoffs are here. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers, you can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And FanDuel has a bunch of different ways for you to pick up that W. You get that money you want. Not only can you bet on who's going to win the game, you know what else you can do at FanDuel? You can pick which players are going to score a touchdown. You can decide how many points each team will score. So if you like doing those prop bets, get on over there to FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com, join today, and that's FanDuel.com. Your chance, $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Maybe, excuse me, pardon me, wow. All those California recruits that you, myself, Trojan fans have lamented about leaving California, all those ones who have called USC their dream school, And then one day they're like, oh, you know what? Nah, USC, they were my dream school, but I'm going to go somewhere else because I'm getting paid. Well, maybe all those former California recruits who were playing somewhere else, maybe that'll start changing going forward. Two schools that have taken advantage while the USC is down, kind of while USC is chasing its tail, trying to figure things out. Oregon, Ohio State. In this game that I watched, the playoff game, again, this is a USC angle. I was looking at who saw the field, who was playing. And then I went back and I checked out some of the guys who USC thought they were bringing in the 2024 class. They ended up going elsewhere. And I looked at their stats throughout the season. So I know he wasn't part of the 2024 recruiting class, but remember Mateo Ngalele? Yeah, we know. Yeah. His brother, the quarterback. Well, he had a pretty good regular season, but in the playoff game, he was a ghost. One tackle. In this past recruiting class at USC, just closed out in 2024 this past season, they were going up for guys that ended up at Oregon, like wide receiver Dylan Gresham, wide receiver Ryan Pelham, defensive lineman from Mater Dei, Aiden Braylon, a couple of guys from Long Beach Poly. You had Dylan Williams, you had Dalen Austin. Remember Dakota Fields, who was actually committed to USC from Sarah? All those guys were some of the best in Southern California. But they didn't play, not at Oregon. Freshmen play at USC. All those names I just rattled off, none of those guys played. They did. They might have saw one snap early in the year. But there's no actual statistics for them. They didn't record a sack or a tackle or a reception. I have a feeling all those guys that Oregon got from the transfer portal, they played those guys instead. Remember, Oregon spent a grip of money during the offseason. Brought in wide receivers like Trayshawn Holden, Evan Stewart from Texas A&M. Oh, by the way, everyone's trying to figure out why he didn't play in the playoff game. Apparently, he got dinged up during pregame warmups. Okay. Oregon paid that guy $1 million to come play for 1 year. He was their leading receiver during the regular season. When they needed him most, he was just standing on the sideline in uniform. Interesting. I'm willing to say, I'm going to go out on a limb. Oregon's going to see a lot of guys jumping into the transfer portal now. They got a 5-day window to work with. And if not now, the spring window, and definitely after the 2025 season. If all those recruits from California don't get playing time, when you're away from home, you get homesick. We'll see what happens. Maybe the idea was, all the guys who left California this past recruiting cycle, maybe they had the idea, you know what, let's just go get our money now. Why it's being handed out like Halloween candy? Because look, everybody knows that in 2025, there is going to be some sort of salary cap structure put into place. They're still kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that right now. However, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. According to the report from Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports, the expectation is that schools will operate under a projected salary cap of $20.5 million next year, this upcoming season. The cap is supposed to be 22% of the Power Four conferences, the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, and SEC, their revenue shares from the previous academic year. And additionally, the cap has built-in escalators of 4% in years 2 and 3 before being recalculated in year 4. So who knows what the actual number is going to be? But this is why I've speculated that I think scholarship numbers are going to get capped as well. I don't think you're going to see programs going with 85 scholarship players. You don't need that many. Let me put that into context for you. When teams travel in the big conference, you can take 70 players with you. That's how many guys get on the airplane. Think about it this way. In the NFL, there's only it's a 53-man roster, and what is it, an 8-man practice squad, whatever that actual number is. So you've got 11 starters, you've got your 2 deep. That's 44 players that you're relying on, not counting special teams, offense and defense. Why do you need 85 scholarships? I think 70 is probably enough. So let's say you've got $20.5 million, and that's got to be spread along the entire athletic department. That's just not for football. Most agree that football and basketball are going to gobble up the big chunk of whatever the number is going to be, whatever the revenue sharing number is. Football, men and women's basketball will take the majority of it. So let's just use a round number here. Let's say 15 million of the 20.5 goes to football. I'm just picking a number. Divide that evenly amongst 85 scholarship players. I did the math. Each player on scholarship is going to be making $176,470 per year before taxes. Sign me up. So speaking of recruiting, I'm wondering now if that will maybe help keep California players at home. Think, you know what? I don't need to go elsewhere. I can get paid now. I can stay at home. And I can feel good that I'm going to the school that I really do like. I'm not just going to a school because they're paying me to go there. A couple of real quick notes here. It is, since I'm kind of talking about recruiting a little bit, today, if you're watching this episode of Locked On USC, it's January 2nd. There's going to be an announcement today, defensive lineman, Jaraylon McCoy, mentioned it before. He's at the Under Armour All-Star game in Orlando, Florida. He's part of the 2026 recruiting class, and I'll get into that once the 2025 class is completely closed out, done. Don't forget, we still have the February signing period. Still got the transfer portal we're sorting out. So I just want to kind of keep you updated. Yeah, USC is in the hunt. They could get McCoy's commitment. As I mentioned on a previous episode of Locked On USC, early signing period, December. Just because you have them committed, got to hold on to them. And USC is still looking to bolster their 2025 roster. This upcoming weekend, USC is going to be hosting some defensive linemen. I mentioned Jeffrey Imbe from Purdue. There's also Jamori Robinson from University of Texas, San Antonio. He'll be on campus. This is a name I'm really intrigued with. His name is Myquise Humphrey Grace, 6'4", 255-pound defensive end, edge rusher, South Dakota. He's also going to be in LA this weekend. So I've told you about Jeffrey Imbe. He's from Purdue. He started his career at Auburn. He also had a stop at Independence Junior College. The reason I'm intrigued by Myquise, check out these numbers. In 2024, he ended the regular season as the Missouri Valley Football Conference leader in tackles for loss, 17, sacks, 9.5. I'm going to be talking about tackles for loss in the next segment along with the linebacker. So keep that number in line there. Humphrey Grace also had 101 total tackles last season. He was the MVFC Defensive Player of the Year, first team AP All-American defensive lineman for his division, first team stats perform All-American, first team Phil Steele All-American, second team American Football Conference the AFCA All-American, and he was also named a 2024 Buck Buchanan Award finalist. I'll tell you what, if he can recreate that type of production from the Russian spot at this level of competition and at USC, yeah, USC found a good one. They can get him. I really like those numbers. And I really like the way that Antonlynn and Eric Henderson and Sean Nua can evaluate talent. So you add that guy to USC's 2025 recruiting class, which includes, don't forget, Thanos, Jakeem Stewart. You got Floyd Boucard, Gus Cordova, Neela Tupou, Ash Jacobson. USC's building their roster the right way. Defensive line, offensive line. One more segment to go here. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I remember all the excitement of the past playoff games, and I cannot wait to make new memories with the updated format and with all these extra teams involved. Just gives you something to watch. I love college football, so the more the better. Game Time gives you all the better. They have this new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to events even easier. What it does is it filters out all the fluff. It's only going to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of different tickets. I know the USC football season is over. The basketball season is here. Juju Watkins, she's got the Lady Trojans doing great stuff, nationally ranked. The men, they're hosting Michigan this Saturday. Get to the Galen Center. If you don't have tickets, go to Game Time. You already know how much I love Game Time. I love to see the seat view that they show you. So before you check out, you know exactly what you're getting, and you know exactly what you're paying before you check out. So there's no hidden fees at the end. And if you find a ticket in the same section row for less, Game Time will guarantee you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On yesterday's episode of Locked on USC, my everydayers who listen to the show, who watch the show, I give them some numbers. And this is from 2024. How about this stat? 6.5 tackles for loss. That was your team leader. That number, 6.5 TFLs. Eric Gentry had that many. Eric Gentry did not play past Game 5 for the Trojans. Yet he still led the team. That's sad. That's a sad state of affairs. He played in 5 games and led the team with 6.5 tackles. As a team, USC had just 53, which is good for 118th nationally. That's no bueno. In fact, I'll just say it straight up. That sucks. That barely beats the 52 tackles for loss that USC had in 2021. And we know what kind of crappy season that was. And it's well below what they did in the past 2 seasons. They had 85 TFLs in 2023 and 79 in 2022. USC has not had a team leader finish with 6.5 tackles for loss or less since 1997. That's how pathetic that number is. It makes you wonder how many TFLs would have Gentry posted had he not gotten injured. That's how key of a contributor, how integral he is to USC's scheme. And despite his size, he's still really good with the run defense. He posted a 92.1 run defense grade by Pro Football Focus. That ranked number 1 nationally among linebackers with at least 80 run defensive snaps. I would imagine that number is going to stay right around there if he stays in the whole season. So next year, who's playing with Eric Gentry? You know you've got Desmond Stevens. He's the only linebacker who's got any experience from this season. Rajon Davis, I thought he'd be a key piece in 2024. Never happened. He's now an Oregon State Beaver, and I hope he kills it up there in Corvallis. I thought for sure he'd follow Matt Entz to Fresno State, but instead, Corvallis, whatever. So I guess it makes me wonder if, based on who played this year, how much did those NIL payouts dictate who played? Look, I'm going to miss Mason Cobb. I'm going to miss Easton Mascarenas Arnold. But you would think one of those guys would have passed Gentry on the tackle for loss list. They couldn't get to 6.5. No one could get to 7. I don't know. I know I talk about this all the time. I joked on yesterday's episode that I think Brian Cushing should be USC's linebacker coach. He's just one mean, nasty SOB. And you can never have enough mean, nasty SOBs in your linebacker room. Did you know? Hey, I found out through social media, Brian Cushing's actually in LA. You never know. Stranger things have happened. But here's the thing. Until a linebacker coach is named, no one from the transfer portal is coming to USC. And it's hurting recruiting. Trust me, I can tell you, there's a lot of negative recruiting going on right now. I hear it from the recruits. I hear it from the recruits' parents. This is who USC has returning in their linebacker room. Eric Gentry, Elijah Newby, redshirted in 2024. Desmond Stevens, he played, not a lot, not enough. Jaden Walker, another linebacker from Michigan, redshirt. You have Garrison Madison. Those are the guys returning on scholarship. That's it. Since redshirt sophomore Garrison Madison got to USC, he'll be a redshirt junior next year. He's got a total of 7 tackles. He got 5 of those this past season. So again, Newby used his redshirt. Jaden Walker did the same. You got Eric Gentry, Desmond Stevens. I'm assuming those are your starters going into 2025. And you have a couple guys behind them with talent. That's it. What are we doing in a linebacker, guys? Name a linebacker coach. Yes. Got to get that done. You know what is done? This episode of Locked on USC. I will be back with another episode tomorrow. That's what we do. I'll have my Friday rant. We'll see who won the game between Georgia and Notre Dame. Yeah, I got to go with Georgia. I got to pick the lesser of two evils. Just got to do it. Can never root for Notre Dame, even though I will always root for USC to play Notre Dame every season. You're going to have to pull that from my dead cold hands. Just saying. All right. Once again, thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Don't forget to check out Spencer McLaughlin over there on Locked On College Football. I'm sure he's going to have a rough show. He's an Oregon fan. So I'm sure this is going to be a difficult one for him. He'll have to deal with it. And then when you're done with that, don't forget wearesc.com, Eric McKinney, myself, Scott Strader with recruiting news, Chris Arledge, he's having fun at Oregon's expense. So until the next episode, everyone, you know what to do.